Unless you've been hiding under a rock for these past couple of weeks, then you will know about the collapse of FTX, one of the world's largest crypto exchanges. The reason for this collapse is becoming more apparent as time goes on, but basically Sam Bankman-Fried had been using users' funds to invest in a whole ecosystem of different projects, most notably one of his sister companies called Alameda, which was being run by his girlfriend Caroline Ellison. Alameda were making high-risk, high-leverage trades with large amounts of capital, and when those trades started going wrong, it spelled the end for Sam Bankman-Fried's house of cards. What has since been exposed is that Sam Bankman-Fried wasn't only using users' funds to make risky bets, but he was also donating large amounts of money to the Democrat Party over in the United States to help finance the party during the elections. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the video, so make sure that you stay tuned to find out how deep the rabbit hole goes. So it has now been exposed that FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried used up to 10 billion of customer funds to prop up Alameda research. Now unfortunately those guys lost it all due to some risky trading, and that's what eventually caused the insolvency and the collapse of STX. Now it's saying here, according to the report by the Wall Street Journal, that since FTX had 16 billion in customer assets, the exchange had lent more than half of its customer funds in supporting Alameda. FTX also had to take out an additional loans from other financial firms too, which cost 1.5 billion. But the collapse of FTX is not what we're going to be focusing on today's video. We're actually going to be more focusing on the corruption that was going on behind closed doors over at FTX. Pretty much these warning signs have been going on a long time, as you can see from this news article by Forbes. All the way back in, we can find the date of that on June 28th, 2022. Sam Bankman-Fried warned some crypto exchanges already secretly insolvent. So this guy was on record in interviews trying to say that a number of different crypto exchanges are insolvent, and this was back 5 months ago. And the fact that he was kind of downplaying some other different crypto exchanges, warning that some different crypto exchanges will soon fail, but didn't seem to mention anything that was going on behind closed doors over at FTX, kind of says everything that you need to know about his character. And then fast forward 5 months, and it's actually his own exchange that was secretly insolvent. So moving back onto the donations that Sam Bankman-Fried was making with users' funds over to the Democrat Party. As you can see here, I've got a couple of different articles, both stating that he was actually the second biggest donor to the Democrat Party behind George Soros, and it had been noted that for the most recent election, the midterms that just happened a couple of weeks ago, he had donated over 40 million US dollars to the Democrat Party to fund their election campaign. I do actually have an image here, as you can see, from opensecrets.org. You can just see how much money in total that FTX had been donating. You can see them right there behind Soros Fund Management. You can see them ahead of Citadel, ahead of Blackstone, ahead of Oracle, ahead of all these major institutions. FTX are right up there at number 3. So this is where it starts to get really interesting now. Another article here about the ties between Sam Bankman-Fried and the Democrat Party. Now the ties aren't actually just between Sam and the Democrats. Once you actually dig into more detail, you actually find out that his whole family and close circle has been involved in this. Now I just want to stick this image up on the screen, and I know this is just a screenshot, taken off social media, what somebody's put, but I'm going to show you a little bit more evidence to support these claims a little bit later. So this is a timeline of how things have gone. So it was April 25th, 2019 when Biden announced his presidential campaign, and it was just 13 days later that Sam Bankman-Fried, son of Barbara Fried, which we're going to get into soon, launches the FTX exchange. Now it's important to mention that Barbara Fried is the founder of the political fundraising organization Mind the Gap, who have also donated very large amounts to the Democrat Party over the recent years. The exchange was then a magical success overnight. SBF soon after becomes one of the biggest donors to the Biden campaign. On election day, FTX explodes completely, and then he goes on to list the different family members of Bankman-Fried and then their positions within either maybe government, maybe some links to the World Economic Forum, and so on and so forth. You can see here his brother was the founder of Guarding Against Pandemics. As you can see here, he was a legislative correspondent to the US House of Representatives and an advisor to large political donors in the Democrat Party. His aunt, Linda Fried, is a WEF member on the Global Agenda Council on Aging. His father, Joseph Bankman, is a Stanford professor who lobbied on behalf of the hedge fund managers before Congress. Is head of ventures and commercial at FTX. Amy Wu actually started working with the Clinton Foundation years before that. The director of engineering, Nishad, had spent over $8 million for Dem candidates. And finally, Obama's commodity futures trading commissioner, Mark, was literally the head of FTX policy and regulation. So there we have a bunch of links between these global organizations, World Economic Forum, the Democrat Party, and FTX. So this is a really good Twitter thread actually that goes into detail about all those things that I was just stating there, the different family members of Sam Bankman-Fried and their positions that they've held in the past, whether it be the Caroline Ellison that we were talking about before, Sam Bankman's girlfriend. Her father, Glenn Ellison, is the department head of economics at MIT, and prior to getting appointed at the SEC, Gary Gensler was a professor of the practice of global economics and management at MIT. So you can just see, there's a bunch of links. They also go into more detail, about his father, his mother, her links with Mind the Gap and stuff like that. So this is really interesting. I will be sticking a link to this in the description of the video so you can check all this out yourself, and also his aunt's connections with the World Economic Forum. FTX actually had their own page on the World Economic Forum, which has since been removed since the collapse of FTX, but luckily enough a decent amount of people have managed to take screenshots of that, so I can stick that up on the screen and show you now that FTX were an official partner with the World Economic Forum before the collapse. So moving on, there's a really good article by Blaze Media that goes into all this in really good detail, and also the ties FTX had with Ukrainian government, World Economic Forum and top Biden advisor. So it basically talks about how the funds that are being sent for the US as donations over to Ukraine are involving FTX, and how both Sam Bankman-Fried and the Democrat Party in the US are able to profit off this. So at first it talks about the rise of FTX and how it came to be. What we were talking about before, the collapse of FTX, because of what happened with Alameda funneled 10 billion customer funds into a trading company which lost it all. Bunch of money was stolen as well. Talks into what I was saying before about Sam Bankman-Fried being one of the biggest donators to the Democrat Party over the years using the FTX funds. It states that Sam Bankman-Fried gave Democrats nearly $37 million in 2021-2022. According to Open Secrets, SBF was the second biggest individual donor to the Democrats Party, only surpassed by George Soros, like I was saying before. And he has said back in May that he expected to donate north of $100 million to Democrats for the 2024 election, but vowed to have a soft ceiling of political spending of $1 billion if former President Donald Trump ran again. So you can just see there that this guy has a clear political bias and motivation behind what he's doing. Also talks about how she is a founder of Mind the Gap, which is another organization which has funneled over 20 million to the Democrats. And finally, the FTX connection with the Ukrainian government and World Economic Forum. So basically, the Ukrainian government launched a cryptocurrency donation website in March that was backed by FTX. So basically the way it worked is that Ukraine were accepting crypto as donations, and then they were using FTX to then turn that money into fiat currency and then send it to the bank accounts. You see here early this month, FTX already converted 1 million's worth of Solana and transferred it to the National Bank of Ukraine. So I'm just going to stick an image up on the screen here for some of you guys to kind of understand how this works. So, I mean, maybe we can start Sam Bankman-Fried here, but it all kind of funnels around in a circle anyway. So he's donating basically users' funds over to the Democrat Party, which are then backing Biden. Biden is then making decisions to send public sector money over to the Ukraine, which is partners with FTX. So basically, Ukraine are using FTX to turn this money into fiat. Basically, you have to remember that there are transaction fees and stuff that go into making transactions on an exchange, and that money is going directly back to Sam Bankman-Fried, who is then donating it back to the Democrat Party, and you can see kind of how that circle works there. And I've just already shown you guys the image before that the World Economic Forum did list FTX as a partner. So since this scandal has been exposed, we did see Marjorie Taylor Greene call for an audit of the funds that was being given to Ukraine. I think it's really good to see a Republican politician finally asking for something like this, because I'm pretty sure that if there was a full audit done, that we would see some pretty interesting stuff about where the funds are actually going, especially considering, a few months ago there was the scandal with SBC, who did their own investigation and were claiming that it is likely that only 30% of the US and military aid for Ukraine ever reaches the front lines, which they then deleted afterwards. But you can just kind of see there is huge amounts of money that is being donated over to the Ukraine that isn't actually ending up there and is essentially going missing. So I think it's only right that a full audit is done to find out what is actually being done with these donations. So one other thing I wanted to mention was that in the last couple of days there has now been the House Committee announced a hearing into the FTX collapse featuring Bankman-Fried, but unfortunately that's going to be headed by Representative Maxine Waters, who is a Democrat and actually has a relation with Sam Bankman-Fried. As you can see here, I'll be sticking a photo of both of them up looking nice and friendly. So considering we've got representatives like this heading the hearing into the FTX collapse, I'm not too confident that we're going to get much of an outcome from that. And so yeah, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about today, guys. So drop a comment below, let me know what you guys think about this whole scandal and what you think will happen next. This could be really just the start of something a lot more serious, because Alameda wasn't the only project that Sam Bankman-Fried invested users' funds into. There was a whole ecosystem of projects, which I'm going to stick on the screen now, and you can see that FTX had invested in. So it's very important to be very careful, especially if you're maybe involved in any of these projects. You might have money, inside one of these protocols. Then you've got to be very, very careful at the moment, because we could see kind of like a knock-on effect now. So it's important to be keeping your funds safe. So I guess the all-important question is, did Sam Bankman-Fried create FTX because he wanted to create one of the biggest and best crypto exchanges, or was FTX made in order to be used to then finance the Democrat political agenda? But I'll let you guys decide the answer to that one. So guys, that's all I've got time for today, so thanks for listening as always, and until next time, bye.